And then we had phosphine. While I was working on phosphine, and my team, wow, someone else across the globe, Professor Jane Greaves in UK, was also working on phosphine as a sign of life. And remember how I told you about the line between mainstream and crazy? So this part of the talk now is on the side of crazy. And she purposely wanted to look for signs of life on Venus by way of a gas that doesn't belong. And she came across phosphine as well. And phosphine has a signal, its atmosphere absorbs, it rotates, all molecules rotate, its ground to first excited state is at radio wavelengths, where she's an expert astronomer. So someone connected our two teams, and she invited my team to join her team. Now, I'm not a radio astronomer, but we helped interpret, we were going to help interpret whatever she found. Now, why is it crazy? So you all know about Venus. The surface is so hot. It is 700 Kelvin. It is super hot, hot enough to melt lead. No life lives on that surface of Venus. But just like on Earth, if we hike up a mountain or go in an airplane, it gets colder and colder, and so too on Venus. And so 50 kilometers above the surface of Venus, it is room temperature up there. It's actually room pressure as well. And that's why people have thought about life in the clouds since Carl Sagan first threw this idea out there over half a century ago. But here's the thing. The clouds of Venus are not made of water. They are made of concentrated sulfuric acid. And here's where we have a bit of a generational divide. Because when I ask people, hey, do you know what sulfuric acid? Do you? Like over a certain age, you literally played with that stuff in your basement. Yeah, see, people are saying they did. Under a certain age, we're not allowed to touch that stuff. It's so dangerous, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But let's talk about phosphine on Venus, okay? Remember, just like oxygen, a gas that shouldn't be there, it's highly reactive. It doesn't it doesn't come out of like volcanoes or lightning or meteorite delivery. And so our kind of current thinking was if we find a gas like that, it leaves room for there being life there. And this was the whole thing some of you followed 5 years ago. Well, let me tell you, the sign of phosphine on Venus, this whole thing, it literally it's incredibly controversial. And just for lack of a better word, I want to say it was trashed at every level. You know, very noisy data. You have to do a lot of signal processing. And all the data is public. It's from taxpayer facilities. And some teams, many teams, did not recover the signal in the same data using their own methods. Some teams did recover the signal. And we get to our second point. If the signal is real, is it attributed to the right gas, right? Well, I think there's only one other option. Out there in the radio, the lines are really spread out, so there's not too much going on. But people want to think maybe it's sulfur dioxide, a gas that already exists on Venus. Okay, we have arguments against that. And finally, let's, for argument's sake for a moment, say, let's, for a moment, assume the signal is real, molecule is phosphine, correctly identified. Now you have all the people saying, is it made by life or some other process? And I'm not kidding you, we wrote 100 pages showing it's not made by some other process, like volcanoes or lightning or meteorite delivery, but there's still room. We don't know everything about the Venus chemistry. Oddly enough, Pioneer Venus has evidence of phosphine, a NASA mission that went to Venus decades ago. So that's where we are with phosphine. So the Venus atmosphere, it's made of sulfuric acid. We are getting on to what we think is a new paradigm for sulfuric acid as a potential solvent for life. And it's not what my talk's about, but I'll just give you maybe one example, one or two examples. And before I do, we've been recruiting people. So it's not just my son, Max. He's a senior undergraduate at Worcester Polytechnic. His professor, Professor Dustin Heilman, amateur astronomer, shout out to him, he's here somewhere. Max recruited his professor, and so we're sort of slowly gaining other people. His professor works on proteins, like actual biology. But we've put like our amino acids in concentrated sulfuric acid, 20 biogenic amino acids, with one exception, stable. Chemically modified, but stable. Our DNA is unstable. But part of it, the latter part, ACGT, adenine, guanine, cytosine, stable. We have shown, our extended team has shown that you can take some like parts of a meteorite or formaldehyde or just some little thing and put it in sulfuric acid. And over time, it grows into like a rich organic chemistry. And hey, planetary scientists may be shocked about this. Turns out, the oil industry already knew about this. They use concentrated sulfuric acid to take crude oil to more sophisticated organic projects. We have shown, and by the way, I'm summarizing like 4 years of work here. Again, part of our extended team showed you can put lipids, these are like fats with a polar head, in sulfuric acid. And in water, people do this to study the origin of life on Earth. They're trying to make make life from scratch in the lab. And what these lipids will do is they'll point their polar head out to the polar water and make like a membrane, like a very poor person's cell membrane. Well, in concentrated sulfuric acid, they make these small, tiny little spherical membranes. This is the tip of the iceberg. Like, I'm not saying that there is life in the Venus atmosphere. I'm just trying to convince you it's worth going to the Venus atmosphere. And that's what we're going to do. Proud to be leading the Morningstar missions to Venus. You know, sometimes Venus is observable in the morning sky, I think now. It's so bright and shining. This is like a renewal for this idea about there could be life in Venus, in the atmosphere. We're going to go back to Venus with a series of missions. They have to be private-public partnerships. This is still too crazy for mainstream. You know, we used to be called Venus Lifefinder missions. We got such a huge pushback, not just from our colleagues at NASA, but also just from private donors and others. So we now rebrand it as Morningstar missions to Venus. If you're following this, you may have seen that little picture with that cute little thing. That's our first mission to Venus. It's a little probe about this big. It's a cheap mission. It's a rocket, we call it Rocket Lab mission to Venus because Rocket Lab is supplying the rocket, the cruise vehicle, and that little probe. And that probe just had its heat shield put on it at NASA Ames, and that's where that picture is just after NASA Ames has put the heat shield on, because it will be dropped off with no parachute, and it will come rushing down through the Venus atmosphere, and this kind of thin, special carbon heat shield will prevent the whole thing from like burning up. Now, it's hard to see here, there's a little tiny hole that instrument the gloved hand is holding is going to go inside the probe, inside a pressure vessel. It's going to shine a laser through that hole. And we're just trying to measure the backscattered polarized radiation and look for fluorescence to make sure that they're not pure sulfuric acid, that there are organic molecules or other things on the inside. At the bottom, it's like an embarrassment of riches right now. I just got back from Hawaii from March break, and it was also Georgia Tech March break. And our partners, led by Chris Carr at Georgia Tech, put one of our instruments. So in space, you'll have more than one. Okay, I know you wish you could get more than one copy of your favorite telescope. Probably not feasible. But we usually have 2 or 3 versions of our flight instrument. We have like a flight spare in case something goes wrong with the flight instrument. Sometimes we have a 3rd version, an engineering model that we can beat up. But here we took our flight spare and put it on a drone. You can see with the grass, that's this ranch that we went to fly the light aircraft. There in the middle is like a kind of close-up of this light aircraft without its wing. And there on the right, you can see the instrument. We flew it around, not over the volcano. We weren't allowed to do that, but the fog coming from the volcano, flying it out just to test all this out. This mission is scheduled to launch in 2026. As a second mission, we want to send a balloon. We really want to go for gold here. And that means look for very complex molecules, so complex that it supports the idea of life in the Venus atmosphere. So not just amino acids or nucleic acid bases, but long, complex molecules. And here's a picture of us visiting our balloon vendor. It's in Red Line Aerospace in British Columbia, Canada.